In 177 AD, Roman guards forced a 15-year-old enslaved girl named Blandina to the Colosseum's dim underground tunnels. The stench of blood and animal rot thickened the air. Above her, 50,000 Romans shouted for entertainment. What happened to her over the next 3 days would later be viewed as one of the sparks that helped weaken the Roman Empire. But even that isn't the worst part. For nearly 2,000 years, historians had the real truth about what was done to captive women in the arena. Your textbooks highlight gladiator battles. Museum plaques talk about spectacle and culture, yet they never mention the ritual performed before every single game. They never explain why. In 2019, archaeologists suddenly stopped digging after discovering something so disturbing beneath the Colosseum that it made international headlines. By the time you finish this video, you'll understand 3 things your history class never told you. First, the pre-game ritual Roman lore acquired, yet modern historians avoided describing in detail. Second, the execution method so vicious it had its own legal category, specifically crafted for women. And third, the 2019 archaeological discovery that proved the scale of this horror was far greater than anyone imagined. If you're ready to confront the darkest chapter of Roman history, hit subscribe now, because it gets even darker from here. And trust me, stay with me until the 8-minute mark, because I'm going to show you the graffiti inscription they literally tried to chisel off the walls. Let's set the scene. Rome, 100 AD. The city gleamed with marble and gold on the outside, yet beneath it all lay an empire built on human suffering. Here's a statistic historians hide in the footnotes. 60 million slaves. That's 1 out of every 3 people in the Roman Empire. Not servants, not workers, property. The Colosseum could pack in 50,000 onlookers. It contained 28 elevators hauling wild animals from below. It had a retractable awning managed by sailors. It even featured an advanced drainage system for when they flooded the arena for staged naval battles. But here's something else. It also housed holding cells. Dozens of them. And here's what your history teacher never bothered to mention. Most of those cells didn't contain gladiators. They held female captives, war prisoners from Germania, Britannia, and North Africa. Women labeled criminals for being Christian, rejecting marriage, or simply being caught in the wrong place during a raid. Every one of them was about to face something far worse than death, because death would have been mercy. For decades, historians obsessed over the gladiators, the fighters, the champions of the arena. They dissected their weapons, their training routines, their diets. Meanwhile, they skimmed past what occurred in the tunnels below, dismissing it with one polished phrase: entertainment for the masses. But in 1952, an archaeologist named Giovanni Carbonara uncovered something while repairing a collapsed section of the Colosseum's hypogeum, the underground complex. A fragment of graffiti etched into stone. 6 Latin words that, when translated, read, "They took her screaming. Mars, forgive us." Mars was a god of war, not compassion, not absolution. War. So what could be so horrifying that a Roman, someone from an empire that crucified thousands, felt compelled to beg a war god for forgiveness? Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal isn't rumor. It appears in legal records, church documents, and the journals of Roman authors who witnessed it themselves. And here's your first warning. You think you know where this is going? You don't. The Romans had a term for it, damnatio ad lupanar, literally condemnation to the brothel. But this wasn't a building somewhere else in the city. The brothel was the arena itself. Here's how it worked. Before the main events, before the gladiator battles, before the hunt of wild beasts, the guards brought out the female captives. Roman law, specifically the Lex Julia Divina Publica, classified certain women as infames, disgraced, dishonored. Once labeled infames, a woman lost every legal protection. The crowd knew what was coming. Vendors sold wine and dates. Families ate lunch. Children watched openly. This was not hidden, not shameful. It was scheduled entertainment. You might think the records are vague, that we're inferring. But no, we have names. We have testimonies. Tertullian, an early Christian author from Carthage around 200 AD, wrote a full treatise on the spectacles. He described attending games where women were handed to victorious gladiators as rewards. And here's the part nobody tells you. This was legal. The Roman Senate didn't just permit it, they organized it. Officials scheduled it, and specific days were reserved. The Ludi Romani, the Great September Games, always included these preliminary entertainments. Gladiators were not monsters. They were slaves, forced into a system that dehumanized everyone. Records from the Spartacus Revolt in 73 BC note one rebel demand. And the woman rewards, showing this had been happening over a century before the Colosseum. Imagine yourself there, chained in a cell that reeks of death, hearing the crowd roar, knowing what's coming, and knowing that Rome considers you less than human. No rights, no protection, no appeal. One woman refused. Her name is lost, but Titalian records her defiance. She fought back, injuring 2 guards enough to require medical attention. The arena officials then decided to make an example of her using Rome's most infamous execution, damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. But the phrase doesn't convey the horror. The Romans didn't just throw victims at animals. They staged elaborate productions blending myth and death. Hercules, Perseus, the gods and their victims. The myths made real. They created fatal ads, theatrical reenactments where the violence was real and the victim truly died. Female captives were often the chosen performers for certain myths, ones involving violation and extreme violence. Here's a documented case that will chill you to the bone. The Roman poet Martial, writing around 80 AD during the Colosseum's inauguration, describes a performance of the myth of Pasiphae, a queen said to be cursed to mate with a bull. In Martial's account, a female prisoner was dressed in costume and an actual bull was brought out. You might think this is metaphorical, but perhaps I'm reading ancient poetry too literally. Josephus, the Jewish historian who witnessed the games under Emperor Titus, confirms it. He records seeing a woman in a roll of durst, tied to a bull and dragged to death. Josephus specifies, the woman's cries were real, as was her death. Here's the shocking part. The Colosseum had a pulley system designed specifically for these performances. Archaeologists have mapped the underground machinery. Platforms could lift set pieces and people from the hypogeum to the arena floor. Trap doors released animals at precise moments. This was not crude cruelty. It was engineered theater. Stage managers, set designers, costume departments, all coordinated it. One inscription near the Colosseum lists job titles: bestiarius, animal handler, editor, game producer, and the chilling one, Carta, believed to mean costume specialist for fatal performances. The woman who refused the preliminary ritual was dressed as Prometheus. You know the myth. Prometheus stole fire from the gods and Zeus chained him to a rock where an eagle ate his liver daily. The Romans recreated it. She was chained to a post and a trained eagle was released. It didn't kill her quickly. That was the point. Titalian writes she endured 3 attacks before dying. The crowd watched for hours, eating, cheering, and betting on how long she'd last. Even the animals were trained. Bears, lions, and bulls were conditioned to prolong the spectacle. Surviving manuals instruct exactly how to train a leopard to wound, but not instantly kill. I need to pause here. If you're still watching, you clearly want to confront history's darkest truths, not sanitize them. Subscribe now, because next week I'll cover something even more buried. What Roman soldiers did in conquered cities, often described in textbooks as standard military occupation. It wasn't standard, it's nightmare fuel. You might be thinking, sure, this is horrific, but at least it's ancient history. At least we have the full record. That's what I thought too, until archaeologists began digging in 2019 and uncovered evidence proving we didn't know the half of it. The Colosseum has been studied for centuries, measured, mapped, and analyzed by hundreds of scholars. So when the Italian Ministry of Cultural Heritage announced that during routine maintenance they had found an unexpected burial site, nobody anticipated it would rewrite our understanding of the arena's victims. In March 2019, workers repairing a collapsed section of the Colosseum's eastern foundation, the area usually off-limits to tourists, were drilling to install support beams when the ground gave way. Beneath the surface, they discovered a hidden chamber. Inside were human remains, many of them. The Italian archaeological team, led by Dr. Alessandro Giovannini, carefully excavated the site over 8 months. What they found stunned even veteran forensic anthropologists: 173 skeletons, all female, all showing signs of trauma, all dating to Colosseum's active period between 80 and 300 AD. Here's what made the team stop digging. Dr. Giovannini's report states, the skeletal damage pattern suggested repeated, systematic trauma over long periods. These women didn't die in single events. They were held long-term. Bone analysis revealed 3 horrifying details. First, malnutrition, not total starvation, but barely enough food to survive. Second, healed fractures, broken bones that had mended, showing they survived prior injuries and were kept alive for future use. Third, trauma patterns consistent with restraints. Wrist and ankle bones bore grooves from shackles. DNA analysis revealed even more horror. These women were not Roman. They came from across the empire: Germania, North Africa, the Middle East, Britannia. Ages range from 12 to 30. 12. And remember the 3 things the DNA revealed? Number 3, disease markers. Almost every skeleton showed infections that Rome had treatments for, meaning these women were deliberately denied basic medical care. Number 2, dietary isotope analysis revealed something strange. Their last meals were surprisingly elaborate: fish, imported fruits, wine. Why would captives be given luxury food right before death? Because the Romans believed sacrificial victims needed purification through specific diets. These women weren't just being executed. They were being ritualistically prepared. And number 1, the detail that made international headlines, only to vanish from the news within a week: evidence of pregnancy. Multiple skeletons showed pelvic changes consistent with childbirth or late-term pregnancy. The implications are horrifying. There may have been a breeding program, or worse. Women were kept alive through pregnancy and then used in the games afterward. Dr. Giovannini's team published their findings in the Journal of Roman Archaeology in October 2019. Within 2 months, the Italian government classified the burial site and suspended public access. The full report, meant for 2020, still hasn't been released. Here's the detail that haunts me. One skeleton, labeled Subject 47, clutched something in her hand. Bone fibers revealed she had held it so tightly that her hand had fused around it. Forensic experts spent 3 weeks carefully separating the bones without destroying the object. It was a small wooden cross, roughly carved, about 2 inches tall. Carbon dating confirmed it was roughly 1,850 years old, matching the skeleton. This woman died holding a symbol of a religion Rome was trying to eradicate. She was a Christian martyr. And that brings us to the one woman whose name survived history, the one who changed Rome itself: Blandina, the 15-year-old girl dragged to the Colosseum's tunnels in 177 AD. History often omits the truth. She didn't just die. She triumphed. Blandina was a slave from Lugdunum, modern-day Lyon, France. She was Christian, which in 177 AD was considered criminal when Emperor Marcus Aurelius targeted Christian communities. She was arrested with dozens of others and transported to Rome for execution during the Games. The detailed account comes from a letter written by surviving Christians in Lugdunum to communities in Asia Minor, preserved by Eusebius, a 4th-century church historian. The details are so precise and brutal that scholars for centuries assumed exaggeration, until the 2019 archaeological discovery suggested otherwise. On the first day of the Games, Blandina was bound to a post and animals released. Yet sources say the animals refused her: lions, bears, even a trained bull. The crowd saw this as divine intervention. The Games editor, furious, returned her to the cells. On the second day, they tried damnatio ad lupanar. The letter records she was offered to gladiators. Yet again, something extraordinary happened. A gladiator named Marcus, himself a slave, refused to harm her and was executed on the spot for disobedience. His refusal inspired 2 other gladiators to refuse as well. Chaos erupted. The crowd rioted. The emperor's representative had to step in. On the 3rd day, they scourged her. 40 lashes with flagrum, a whip embedded with metal and bone designed to flay skin. Then she was placed in a red-hot iron chair. Finally, they trapped her in a net and exposed her to a bull, which gored her to death. But here's what history often overlooks. Blandina's defiance and the gladiators' refusal triggered a political crisis. The games were meant to showcase Roman power and divine favor. Instead, they reveal that Rome's entertainment relied on unwilling participants, both victims and executioners, raising uncomfortable questions about the system itself. Within 25 years, remarkable reforms followed. Septimius Severus, who became emperor in 193 AD, issued reforms in 202 AD addressing arena practices. The Theodosian Code documented restrictions on using female criminals in preliminary entertainments and legally recognized that damnatio ad bestias constituted cruel and unusual punishment. It wasn't enough. The practices continued, but Blandina's story spread. Copied, translated, and shared across Christian communities, she became one of early Christianity's most celebrated martyrs. Churches were named in her honor, and her feast day, June 2nd, is still observed in Catholic and Orthodox traditions. Here's a historical irony. The system designed to eradicate Christianity, the spectacle deaths meant to intimidate, ended up preserving Christian texts. Letters describing martyrs' deaths were copied obsessively, becoming some of the most detailed records from the period. Rome inadvertently created its own propaganda. By 325 AD, Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity and banned Munera Misericordia. Games without mercy. Fatal sherzads ended. Animal executions were phased out. The Colosseum, once Rome's ultimate symbol of power, became a symbol of everything Christianity opposed. This didn't happen because Romans developed empathy. The empire was collapsing. Animal imports were costly. Slave supplies dwindled. Christianity had grown too strong to suppress. The women in those arenas didn't die in vain. Their deaths helped topple pagan Rome. Yet they shouldn't have had to die at all. The last recorded damnatio ad bestias occurred in 404 AD, when a monk named Timicus jumped into the arena to stop a fight. The crowd stoned him, but Emperor Honorius, appalled, banned gladiatorial combat 3 days later. 173 women in a mass grave, Blandina and countless others whose names are lost. And finally, one monk who said enough. The Colosseum was not just an arena. It was a systematic execution facility where female captives endured horrors historians have barely begun to describe. It was legal. It was scheduled. It was entertainment for families. And we have the evidence. Legal documents, eyewitness accounts, skeletal remains, and even the tools they used preserved in museums that still wrestle with how to display them. The suffering of these women inadvertently preserved the early Christian texts that recorded their martyrdom. Those texts, copied and circulated across the empire, helped Christianity grow from a persecuted sect into the dominant religion of Europe. History works in strange ways. Sometimes the worst atrocities create the most unexpected consequences. Today, UNESCO protects multiple burial sites around the Colosseum as human rights memorials. In 2020, a plaque was added to the eastern wall, honoring the nameless victims whose suffering is etched into these stones. Yet the Italian government has still not released a full archaeological report. Draw your own conclusions. Here's my question for you. Think carefully before answering in the comments. Should modern Rome, both the city and the Catholic Church headquartered there, formally apologize for what happened in these arenas? Some argue modern Italians cannot be held responsible for the actions of ancient Romans. Others say acknowledgement matters, no matter how distant in time. What do you think? If this video disturbed you, and it should, you'll want to see what I uncovered about Roman military tactics in conquered territories. Your textbooks call it Romanization. Archaeological evidence tells a much darker story. That video drops next Tuesday, and I've already received warnings from academic colleagues that it's too controversial, which is exactly why it needs to be told. Click subscribe, hit the notification bell, and watch next week's video. It covers what we discovered when analyzing the skeletal remains of children in Pompeii, because Rome's darkness didn't end with adults. History isn't comfortable, but it is necessary. I'll see you in the next one.